We married with the promise of building a future together, but the cracks in our foundation grew deeper with every passing day. That fight, the one where he threw the younger, perkier girl jab, cut me to the core. It wasn't just the insult, it was the disrespect. I went to bed that night with tears stinging my eyes, lying stiffly beside him while he snored without a care in the world. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He still asked for his coffee, still complained about the eggs, still left his dirty socks in the middle of the living room. It was as though our explosive fight the night before had evaporated into thin air, and in that moment, I realized something chilling. He didn't see me as a partner, he saw me as a stand-in for his mother. When I left for my business trip the following week, part of me felt liberated. I remember staring out the airplane window, the clouds stretching endlessly, and thinking, maybe this is the break I need, a week without playing wife, maid, and mother all rolled into one. I hoped, naively, that the time apart might wake him up, maybe being alone for once would make him appreciate me. But that hope was crushed the moment I returned. I walked through the door, suitcase in hand, expecting the house to be in chaos but still ours. Instead, silence hung heavy in the air. The sink was piled with dirty dishes, the laundry basket overflowing. On the dining table sat an envelope, his familiar scrawl across the front, Grace. My heart pounded as I opened it, and there it was, divorce papers. The note beside them was almost laughable in its pettiness. Since you abandoned the housework, I'm returning to my parents. Consider the divorce papers and think it over. I stared at it, the rage boiling inside me. Abandoned the housework? That was his breaking point? Not the endless nights I stayed up finishing reports while also cleaning up after him? Not the times I carried the weight of our lives while he sat playing video games? No, it was me daring to leave for work that shattered his fragile ego. I didn't even cry. I was too angry to cry. Instead, I sat down at the table, pen in hand, and signed where I needed to sign. The sound of my signature scratching across the paper was oddly satisfying, like a door slamming shut. The next morning, I marched into the courthouse and filed them without hesitation. When Edward came storming in the following day, his face was pale, eyes wide with panic. I almost laughed at the irony. "Where are the divorce papers?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "They've been filed," I replied calmly, meeting his eyes. His bravado crumbled instantly. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands, sobbing like a child. You actually did it," he stammered. "I didn't think you'd go through with it." Watching him break down, I felt no sympathy, just a hollow sadness for the year I had wasted believing this marriage could work. He wanted a mother, not a wife, and I refused to sacrifice my dignity for that role. But his reaction didn't end there. Within hours, his mother Michelle called, her voice shrill over the phone. "Grace, how could you humiliate my son like this? You should have begged for forgiveness. No decent wife files divorce papers without consulting her in-laws first." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Michelle, your son left the papers for me to sign. If he didn't mean it, he shouldn't have played with something so serious." She gasped, sputtering, "You ungrateful woman, do you know what this will do to his reputation?" Before I could respond, a deeper voice took over the line. It was Arthur, Edward's father. "Enough, Michelle. Grace, I apologize for my son. I warned him marriage meant responsibility, but he chose to remain a child. If this is the path you've taken, I respect it." His words stunned me with their bluntness. For once, someone from Edward's family saw the truth. In the weeks that followed, the divorce finalized quickly. Arthur quietly cut Edward off, refusing to fund his lifestyle any longer. Michelle, furious at her husband's stance, moved in with Edward. The two of them clung to each other, enabling the same old patterns, Edward whining, Michelle coddling, both of them spiraling downward. Meanwhile, my life shifted in the opposite direction. Alone in my condo, I rediscovered silence, peace. The weight that had pressed on my chest for months was gone. I filled the space with small joys, fresh flowers on the counter, my favorite music playing as I cooked, long evenings reading without interruption. At work, my focus sharpened. Without Edward draining me, I poured myself into projects and was soon rewarded with a promotion. My colleagues noticed the change, often remarking how confident and radiant I seemed lately. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, not someone's daughter, not someone's wife, just Grace. Looking back now, I don't regret signing those papers. Edward gave me an exit, and I took it. What felt like the end was really just a beginning. My name is Grace. I'm 32 years old, And I am finally free, free to build a future that's mine, and mine alone. I said, trying to anchor the conversation back to the commitment we had made to each other. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to stay steady. The tension between us was palpable, the kind of thick silence that makes every breath heavy, revealing the deep rifts that had been forming in our marriage from the very start. When Edward, my husband, hinted at divorce during our heated argument, I was taken aback. It wasn't just the word, it was the smug way he let it slip, like a weapon he'd been holding in reserve. You can't possibly want a divorce, can you? He sneered. You wouldn't want to be labeled divorced. Think about what your dad said about sticking together. I froze, stunned by his cruelty, but before I could respond, he added sharply, well, I just did. If you go on this business trip and leave me here alone, I'm seriously considering a divorce. He stormed off to our bedroom, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stood there in the quiet living room, heart pounding, wondering if this was the breaking point I had tried so hard to avoid. Divorce had always been a word I pushed away, something unthinkable because of my parents' emphasis on commitment. But now, for the first time, it didn't sound like a failure, it sounded like freedom. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Edward snored peacefully. I couldn't stop the thought from circling in my mind, maybe this marriage was doomed from the start. The next morning came too quickly, bright and early. I was up packing for my trip, the fallout of our argument still weighing on me. Edward was still nestled under the covers. I nudged him. I'm heading out. You better wake up or you'll be late for work, I said. He gave nothing but a sleepy mumble, rolling over. I sighed, rolled my eyes, and left. A few hours into the trip, my phone buzzed. You barely tried to wake me. Now I'm running late. Did you really go on that trip? I clenched my jaw, typing back quickly. I did wake you up. And yes, I'm on my trip. I'll be back in a week. He read it instantly but left me on scene. Mid-trip, my thoughts wouldn't stop churning. I finally decided to call my parents and share everything: Edward's laziness, his childish dependency, his constant comparisons to his mother, and now his threats of divorce. I braced myself for the disappointment I was sure I'd hear. But to my surprise, my parents were gentle. We had no idea he behaved like this. My father said firmly, Grace, don't stay in something that eats away at you. We will always stand by you. Their words broke me. I cried silently in my hotel room, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time, I knew I wasn't trapped. When I finally returned home a week later, my suitcase felt heavier than usual, not because of the clothes, but because of the decision I knew I had to make. The house was quiet, eerily so. On the dining table sat a stack of divorce papers and a note written in Edward's familiar, messy handwriting. Since you ditched the housework, I'm heading back to my folks. Check out the divorce papers and think things over. My blood boiled. Housework, that was his grievance? But then the anger shifted to clarity. Maybe this was exactly the push I needed. He wanted a divorce? Fine. Let's see how he liked it when I took him seriously. The next morning, I filed the papers. When Edward burst into the condo the following day, his face was pale and frantic. Why didn't you come to my parents' place to apologize? What's gotten into you? He demanded, scanning the room until his eyes landed on the empty spot where the papers had been. His expression froze. Where are the divorce papers? Oh, I filed them, I said, sipping my coffee calmly. You did what? His voice cracked. You went through with it? Thanks for signing them, it made everything smoother. You can't be serious, he paced, pulling at his hair. No, I didn't mean it like that. I just wanted to scare you. You can't actually divorce me. But his pleas rolled off me like water on glass. An hour later, his parents stormed in. Michelle, his mother, pointed a trembling finger at me. How dare you divorce Edward like this? What kind of wife does that? I met her glare calmly. He left the papers filled out on the table. If he didn't want this, why prepare them? Don't get smart with me, Michelle snapped. You're just his wife. You should have fixed this, not ended it. Before the tension could explode further, Arthur, his father, cut through the chaos. Enough. His voice was sharp, commanding. We all fell silent. Arthur turned to me. Grace, tell me exactly what happened. I explained everything, from Edward's refusal to share responsibilities, to the threats before my trip, to finding the papers waiting for me when I returned. My voice didn't waver. I was at my breaking point. He gave me an exit, and I took it. Arthur turned slowly toward his son. You bonehead. I told you marriage is about stepping up, and you use divorce as a weapon? Pathetic. Dad, you're supposed to be on my side, Edward protested, his face red with indignation. But Arthur didn't flinch. No, not this time, you had it coming. Michelle tried to intervene, clutching Edward's arm. Arthur, stop it, our poor boy. Arthur shot her a look that silenced her instantly. This is your fault too, Michelle, you spoiled him, and look where it got us. Keep this up, and I might divorce you next. Michelle paled, her mouth snapping shut. Turning back to me, Arthur's tone softened. Grace, I'm sorry you had to deal with this. You deserve better. Move on. Be happy. With that, he ushered a shell-shocked Edward out the door. The fallout was swift, word spread quickly, and Edward's life unraveled. Arthur cut off all financial support, determined to force his son to grow up. Edward moved into a shabby apartment, and without me, or his father, to pick up the slack, he crumbled. His lateness got him fired, his home became a mess, and for the first time, he tasted the consequences of his dependence. Michelle, unable to cope with Arthur's fury, left him and moved in with Edward. Mother and son clung to each other, struggling with low-paying jobs and endless complaints, their lives spiraling downward together. Meanwhile, I blossomed, alone in my condo. I finally felt peace. The space that once felt suffocating now radiated freedom. I poured my energy into my career, and my work flourished. Promotions followed, and with them, a confidence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning, I woke up to quiet, not the sound of Edward whining about eggs or ties, just peace. My life was no longer bound by his childish needs or Michelle's overbearing interference. I was free, truly free. And I promised myself I would never again confuse dependency for love.